And this is the next iteration of the domain name market, which you probably all know very well now, which is this domain market and these auctioning and the domainers. And sex.com on a certain level set that off, because it suddenly became, hang on, these domains are worth a lot of money. If you remember, in the first wave, .com wave, people were paying silly money for domains and then not quite knowing what to do with them. And it was, well, these days are over. The .com boom's over. This is never going to happen again. Then we had this second wave where people were, hang on, there's lots of people on the internet now. This is worth money again. We can build brands again. And so you see these very high figures. There's actually, if you go underneath diamond.com, you see a whole series of other ones, all from 1999. So it's like an 8-year wave. And probably in 8 years' time, there'll be another wave, and it'll get up to the first 1 billion domain name. I can't resist telling you a little bit, getting off domains, to what actually happened with this fight for sex.com, because I spent years researching this and years reading and a fortune paying for printing out all the legal documents. It's about this high if you stack them up. And I read them all, so I'm going to bore you with a little bit of what I learned, because it took me years. It was a 10-year court battle, which I couldn't figure out for the life of me how anything could take 10 years until you look at the US legal system. And how you see where someone puts in and they say, well, I don't entirely agree with this, and it goes to the judge, and the judge says, well, we need to reformulate this, and it goes back again. And there was 4 amended complaints before they even got into court. And then when they got into court, that took about 3 years. When they got into court, there was Stephen Cohen just obfuscated it again and again and again. He just put extra barriers in the way, and this went on for years. He would have one of the best things that he did. He would just do things to wind Gary Kremen up. Was he decided that they have depositions. I don't know how much are you aware of how the U.S. legal system works, but you have depositions, which is very nice on one level. You can go and say, I want to go and talk to this person and ask them all the questions in the world about this. And if the judge approves it, they have to come. You give them a notice, they have to come to court, or they're held in contempt. And so you can interview people for hours and hours and hours, anyone connected to it. The problem is that this is incredibly slow. But just to wind up Gary Kremen, Stephen Cohen just made up a whole series of people and dotted them around the world. Said, oh, well, you can speak to Philip Thilopousis in Thessalonica on this date, and you can speak to, and there's a Russian name, in Moscow on this date, and you can speak to this person in the Philippines on this date. And he did it just to drive Gary Kremen crazy, because Gary Kremen knew that one of these people would be real, and then one of these people would make all these accusations about, oh, well, he's had this trademark, etc., and then Gary Kremen wouldn't be there to cross-examine him, and then he'd lose his chance. So these stupid games went on for years. He used the money, which drove Gary Kremen particularly crazy, was he used the money that he made from sex.com, and he just spent it on lawyers, very, very good lawyers. And this just dragged, there's a guy called Bob Dorband, who was a very nice guy and was very, very well paid for his legal advice, and basically just stalled it. They were trying to stall it for, what's the window in the US? I think it's 7 years. And if you don't get the claim through the courts, I think it's 5 years. Within the courts, within 5 years, it's written off, statute of limitations. So they actively tried to delay it for 5 years. So at the end of it, the judge would throw it out, and very nearly did it. There was a fantastic web of subsidiaries and offshore accounts that Stephen Cohen produced, which was remarkable. He'd have a name of a company. I was trying to think of several of them. He had about 6 main names, and he'd start companies, the same company name, in different states, and then he'd have slight variations. So he had Sporting Houses International, Sporting Houses Limited, Sporting Houses something else. And whenever anyone tried to sue one of the companies, he'd say, oh, no, we're a subsidiary of the parent company. And then you go to the parent company, no, we're a subsidiary of this other company. And he'd just go round and round and round in circles until, if they finally nailed him down, he declared bankruptcy on that company and then continued with the other companies. And he did this time and time and time again. And if any of you want to know how to launder money, I could now tell you. There was this fantastic mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, which is this beautiful house, which he bought, and it's the only thing Gary Kremen has got off Stephen Cohen, because he tried to put it through bankruptcy, and Gary Kremen's lawyers noticed that he was trying to put it through bankruptcy so he could ship the money over the Mexican border. And so they spotted it, and he got hold of it. So Stephen Cohen, rather than allow Gary Kremen to have his house, just paid a lot of, he's got several henchmen, if you believe that, and he paid a lot of Mexicans to come around, and they trashed his own house. He just destroyed his own house and stuck it on lorries and drove it away, and they poured out all the plumbing, they trashed the kitchen. I mean, there was nothing there. They poured up the carpet, and there was animals living in it by the time Gary Kremen arrived. They pulled up trees, you know, just to annoy him. And so Gary Kremen moved in the guest house and would call him up and tell him that he was living in his house, just to really, really annoy him. He called him up one time, found out his favorite restaurant was this sushi restaurant, and because he had left the menu. So he had his friends around, and he called out and he ordered off the sushi restaurant, and then he called up Stephen Cohen and said, "Oh, what would you like?" and offered to buy him stuff from the sushi restaurant, just to really aggravate him. This is the kind of irritation they were doing to one another. There was this so-called gunfight in Tijuana. Stephen Cohen fled the Mexican border so the US couldn't get to him, and he claimed there was a gunfight in which 2 people were shot. Bounty hunters were sent after him. Gary Cohen put out a $50,000 reward for him. So he says there were bounty hunters, and they had a fight with the Mexican police, so I was never quite sure why the Mexican police were there. And so you have to stop this, and the whole case is moot, and et cetera, et cetera. And it took me about a year until I pinned down the fact this fight never happened. It just never happened. It was just made up by Stephen Cohen because he thought it would be a very effective lie, and it was. It was a very effective lie. And if you do a search on Google, you'll find that every newspaper around the world reported this. You know, there was a gunfight, and they were shooting at one another to get hold of sex.com. It just never happened. And it's one of many, many extraordinary lies that people believe are true. And in the end, the court win, Gary Kremen having fought this for years and years and years and years, and bankrupted himself. He had no money left. He got a nasty addiction to this methamphetamine, which is a very nasty speed drug. He got an addiction to it because he's under so much pressure. And then he eventually won, and that was it. You know, Stephen Cohen had already gone. He was actually already in Monaco at that stage. So Gary Kremen sort of came out on the steps of having won this enormous legal battle, and they said, "How do you feel?" And he says, "Oh, I'm pretty happy." You know, but he still hasn't got any of the money. So where is sex.com now? Getting back to domains, it's just a site now. It's just we've got Google, we've got search engines, and we've got things like Facebook, and it's just a site. I mean, it still makes a lot of money, but this is how drab it can be. The premier adult services portal, looking for adult sites, need a date, sex.com can find all of your adult needs. Incredibly dull explanation, and it's an incredibly dull site. They make money, but it's not exciting. It's not what sex.com was, which I think says something about the domain industry. What's particularly interesting, if you type just sex into Google, even if you take the filter off, so you're saying, please do send me sites for unpleasant stuff, Wikipedia comes top. Wikipedia comes top for sex on a Google search. I have no idea why or how that happened, and I think I despair of society, but that's how it is. So the question is, are the days of the big .coms dead? Well, I'll get to that in a second. This is how you make money now with domains. Domain tasting, which I'm assuming everyone knows what domain tasting is, which is because of this grace period, which ICANN may be closing soon. We don't know. You can have a domain for 5 days, and you can have it for free if you return it. It doesn't cost you anything if you return it. And so what companies do, and they're very, very good at it, is they grab a domain, they look at it, see whether if they put Google ads on it over the course of a year, whether they can make more than the $6 that it costs to keep it. And they take a judgment, and if they say, no, it's not going to make that money, they just hand it back, and it doesn't cost them anything.